Good afternoon, folks. I've got B for you. Now we are discussing um, hospice care, end of life care. So here we go with a narrative I made for today's show. So enjoy. Like I always say before I start the show, if anybody has any show ideas, comments about shows I've done, leave them in the chat below for me, and I'll see what I can do about getting answers, doing other shows for you. Um, let me know in the comments in the chat below. Here we go with B. The day the system stepped back, a clinician long form narrative on losing hospice. Okay, because some states are. What I mean by that is if you're sick, if you are in hospice and you outlive your allotted a hospice time, that's when you people in certain states people get kicked off a hospice, and so they have to reapply. That's what I mean by that. So let's go with the presentation I did for you. Let's go. The day the system stepped back, the call the call came on a Tuesday morning, the kind of morning when the house already felt like it was holding its breath. My husband was asleep in the recliner. We had slowly come to call the good chair, not because it was comfortable, but because it was the only one that didn't make him wince when I helped him shift his weight. His breathing had settled into that shallow rhythm. I recognized instantly the body's quiet negotiation with exhaustion. I was sorting his medications the way clinicians do, by mechanism, by symptom, by the fragile hope that something might ease the day. The hospice coordinator's voice was steady, practiced, almost gentle, but the sentence she delivered was not. He no longer meets eligibility. I felt it land in two places, once in my chest as a spouse, and once in my professional spine as a palliative physician. I had delivered that sentence. I had softened it, contextualized it, wrapped it in clinical reasoning and compassion. But hearing it directed at my own husband, who whose decline was written every breath he took, revealed something I had never fully admitted. Hospice eligibility is not a measure of need. It is a measure of documentation. and documentation is a poor witness to the lived reality of dying. The clinician who knows too much there is a strange dissonance when you are both the caregiver and the expert. I could see exactly why the agency was nervous. His vitals had plateaued. His weight loss had slowed. His charts, the bureaucratic proxy for suffering, looked decisively stable. But I also knew the truth beneath the numbers. His nights were longer, his pain more diffuse, his cognition thinner, his body quieter. In that mistakable way, the signals, the final truth, or the final turn, the documentation did not show the hours I spent repositioning him, the way he startled at shadows, the way his appetite had come had become symptomatic or symbolic rather than nu- nutritional. Clinicians know this. The body tells the truth long before the chart does. But the chart is what Medicare audits, and audits are what agencies fear. That fear shapes care more than any symptom ever will. Eligibility rules bend under the weight of audit anxiety. Recertification circles force families into performance of decline. Coverage gaps widen when stability, even fragile stability, is treated as disqualifying. The system incentives reward agencies for discharging too soon rather than risking too long. I had taught these truths to residents. I had written about them in policy briefs, but living them was different. Living them was devastating. The slow withdrawal. Hospice does not exit dramatically. It it recedes. The first the nurses visit thin out, and then the aides' hours evaporate. Then the chaplain's voice, the one that had become a kind of ritual in our home, disappears. The interdisciplinary team, the very heart of hospice, dissolves like mist. Suddenly, I was the night nurse, the wound care specialist, the symptom manager, the spiritual support, not because I wanted to prove anything, but because the alternative was nothing. This is the part families never forget: losing care before losing the person. The night he turned, 3 days later, 3 days after his discharge, he declined exactly the way I knew he would. His breathing shifted into that familiar pattern: the shallow rise, the long pause, the body's quiet surrender. I sat beside him, holding his hand I had held for years, and felt the weight of every missing resource. No nurse to call, no aide to help, no chaplain to steady the room. Just, just me, a clinician who could name every psychological process unfolding, and a wife who could do nothing to stop it. He died in the early hours of the morning, the house silent except for the soft hum of the oxygen concentrator we no longer needed. There is a particular kind of grief that comes from losing care before losing the person. It is the grief of watching a system withdraw from someone who cannot advocate for himself. It is the grief of becoming the entire care team because of the structure meant to support you stepped away. The aftermath, what clinicians carry. After he died, I found myself replaying the discharge over and over, not because I doubted the agency's intentions, but because I understood their constraints too well. Hospice is not broken because clinicians do not care. Hospice is broken because the regulatory frame is built around suspicion rather than trust. The system assumes fraud before it assumes need. It measures decline instead of suffering. It rewards agencies for discharging stable patients even when stability is fragile, temporary, or manufactured by the very care hospice provides. The result, families like mine become the buffer between policy and reality. The policy truths we must name. The three reforms would change everything: modernize prognosis rules, replace the 6-month requirement with functional and symptom based eligibility, protect long stay patients, and punctive audits that target agencies for caring for slow declining patients, expand interdisciplinary support, guarantee 8 hours caregiver respite, and dementia specific pathways. Dying should not be a compliance exercise. Families should not have to perform decline. Clinicians should not have to choose between honesty and eligibility. The clinicians promise, I could not save my husband from the system's blind spots, but I can name them, I can teach them, I can fight them, and I can help build a hospice model worthy of the people it serves. Because the last months of life should be shaped by compassion, not regulation, by truth, not documentation, by presence, not withdrawal. And because no family should ever learn what I learned, the way I learned it. Okay, here you go, guys. Here's the third part of the presentation. Title: Hospice was built for a different century. My husband paid the price. When my husband was discharged from hospice 3 days before he died, I learned something no family should ever have to learn in America. Dying is governed more by regulation than by reality. The nurse didn't stop coming because his suffering eased. The aide didn't stop coming because his needs diminished. The chaplain didn't stop coming because our grief had somehow resolved. They stopped coming because the documentation, the bureaucratic proxy for decline didn't look bad enough to satisfy Medicare's eligibility rules. As a palliative care specialist, I understand exactly what happened, what was happening. As a spouse, I felt the consequences in my bones. The hospice benefit no longer fits the patients it serves. Hospice was designed in the 1980s for predictable cancer trajectories. Today, most patients enter hospice with dementia, multimorbidity, frailty, and unpredictable decline. Yet the benefit still requires clinicians to clarify that a patient is likely to die within 6 months, a timeline that fits cancer, but it fails almost every other condition. The result is a system where eligibility rules reward rapid decline and penalize slow dying. Recertification circles, forcing families to perform worsening symptoms on schedule. Coverage gaps, leaving dementia and frailty patients without adequate support. Audit pressures push agencies to discharge patients early rather than risk penalties. My husband's chart looked stable. His body told a different story. The system listened to the chart. Families are carrying what policy refuses to see. When hospice withdrew, the burden shifted entirely onto me because I became the night nurse, the wound care specialist, the symptom manager, and the spiritual support, not because I wanted to, but because the alternative was nothing. This is the quiet truth policymakers rarely hear. Families are absorbing the consequences of outdated regulation. They are lifting bodies too heavy for one person. They are managing symptoms too complex for lay caregivers. They are grieving while performing medical care, and they are doing it alone. Hospice clinicians are caught in a system that punishes good care. Hospice nurses, aides, and social workers and chaplains are not the problem. They are they are the most committed professionals I know, but they are working inside a regulatory frame built around suspicion rather than trust. Agencies are penalized more for keeping a patient too long than for discharging them too soon. Documentation outweighs suffering. Audit fear outweighs clinical judgment. This is not a clinical failure. It is a policy failure. 3 reforms would change everything. Modernize eligibility to reflect real illness trajectories. Replace the 6-month prognosis requirement with functional decline symptom burden and caregiver strain. This would allow patients with dementia, frailty, and multimorbidity to receive care earlier and stay on hospice when they need it most. Modernize prognosis rules. Protect long stay patients from punitive audits. Audits should target poor care, not prolonged care. Patients who decline slowly should not be treated as compliance risks. Long stay patient protections. Expand interdisciplinary support to match modern dying. Hospice must guarantee aid hours, caregiver respite, dementia specific pathways, nighttime support, and rapid response symptom teams. Expand interdisciplinary support. These reforms are not radical, they are human, they are practical, and they are urgently needed. Pennsylvania can lead. Pennsylvania has one of the oldest populations in the country. We are already facing the demographic failure, our future. The rest of the nation will soon inherit. Our legislator has the opportunity and the responsibility to modernize hospice policy so families are not left performing medical care in the final days of life. We can incentivize agencies for to care for dementia and frailty patients. Fund caregiver respite and dementia specific training. What require transparency in hospice audits criteria. Support workforce expansion through loan forgiveness and interdisciplinary training. These are achievable steps. They would transform end of life care for thousands of Pennsylvanians. The human cost of waiting. My husband died 3 days after hospice discharged him. 3 days he did not fail hospice. Hospice failed the reality of his illness. And until policy catches up, the way people actually die in America, more families will learn what I learned, that the last months of life are shaped as much by regulation as by disease. We can do better. We must do better, and we must start now. Okay, guys, that is B for you. Give me a little bit for a break, and I will have C for you. Until then, Gator Wellness, take care, folks.